The kingdom of admired its young duke for his discipline, wisdom, and unwavering sense of duty. At only 25 years old, he had transformed his late father's struggling lands into one of the wealthiest duchies in the realm. Trade flourished, roads were safe, and justice was swift beneath his authority. Yet while neighboring rulers praised his leadership, none could claim they truly knew the man behind the title. His expression rarely changed, his words were measured, and his heart seemed locked behind walls no one had ever crossed. To him, feelings complicated decisions, and attachment weakened judgment. He believed a ruler existed to protect people, not to seek personal happiness. The royal family, however, had grown impatient with his refusal to marry. An unmarried duke invited uncertainty, and uncertainty threatened political stability. Noble families eagerly offered their daughters, each hoping to gain influence through marriage, but the duke rejected every proposal without hesitation. He wanted neither romance nor manipulation. Eventually, the king insisted that he choose a wife before the next season's royal assembly, leaving him little room to refuse. Among countless stood one unexpected candidate. Hazel was 23 years old and possessed neither wealth nor prestigious ancestry. Orphaned as a child, she had been raised by an elderly couple in a quiet village where kindness mattered more than titles. She learned to read from borrowed books, to sew worn clothing until it looked new again, and to help neighbors without expecting repayment. Her gentle nature earned admiration wherever she went, and stories of her honesty eventually reached the palace. Unlike ambitious noble ladies, Hazel had never sought attention or power. She simply wished to live with dignity. The Duke selected her for one reason alone. She had nothing to gain from marrying him except security. When the announcement spread across the kingdom, disbelief echoed through noble estates. Aristocratic women felt insulted that an orphan had been chosen over them, while commoners celebrated the remarkable turn of fortune. Hazel herself accepted the proposal with trembling hands, believing it was less a blessing than a responsibility she had never imagined carrying. Though uncertainty clouded her thoughts, she entered the palace determined to honor the trust placed upon her. The wedding unfolded beneath clear blue skies, surrounded by elegant gardens bursting with colorful blossoms. Guests applauded politely, while hidden whispers drifted through the grand hall. A village girl will never belong here. She'll embarrass the duchy within a month. The Duke chose a servant dressed as a duchess. Hazel heard every cruel remark. Instead of lowering her head, she offered warm smiles to those who refused to return them. She understood that respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned through patience. That quiet strength caught the attention of palace servants, though it escaped her new husband entirely. The celebrations ended as evening settled over the estate. Candles flickered softly inside the magnificent bedchamber prepared for the newlyweds. Hazel stood beside the tall windows, watching the last traces of sunset disappear beyond rolling hills. She knew this moment marked the beginning of an unfamiliar life. Somewhere within her remained a fragile hope that affection might grow with time, even if it arrived slowly. The Duke entered without hesitation. His posture remained perfectly straight, his expression unreadable. "I believe honesty is kinder than false hope," he said calmly. Hazel turned toward him, quietly waiting. "I agreed to this marriage because it fulfills my duty to the crown. You're only my responsibility, not my love. I'll provide everything a duchess should have: comfort, protection, respect. But don't expect my heart. It isn't something I intend to give." The words settled heavily between them. For one painful heartbeat, Hazel felt every dream she had quietly nurtured crumble into silence. Yet she refused to let disappointment become bitterness. She lowered her eyes, took a slow breath, and answered with gentle grace. "I understand, Your Grace. I never wish to force what should be freely given. I'll fulfill my duties faithfully and never ask for what you cannot offer." The Duke nodded once, believing the matter settled. As he left to continue reviewing state documents, Hazel remained alone in the enormous room, surrounded by luxury that suddenly felt painfully empty. She looked at the glittering wedding ring resting upon her hand and realized she had become a duchess without becoming a wife in the truest sense. Before dawn painted the horizon, she made a silent promise to herself. If she could never earn the love of the man she had married, then she would devote her life to earning the gratitude of the people he had sworn to protect, never imagining that this quiet decision would one day change both their hearts forever. Days turned into weeks, and Hazel embraced her role as Duchess with quiet determination. Rather than spending her mornings selecting expensive gowns or attending endless social gatherings, she walked through villages, spoke with merchants, listened to struggling families, and carefully observed the hardships hidden beneath the duchy's prosperity. She discovered children who could not read because their parents could not afford tutors, elderly villagers who endured illnesses without medicine, and farmers whose fields had suffered after months of relentless drought. Every story reminded her of the life she had once lived, and she could not ignore their suffering simply because she now wore noble jewels. Using her allowance instead of the duchy's treasury, Hazel established a small school inside an abandoned chapel. She persuaded retired scholars to teach children without demanding payment, offering them comfortable housing in return. Before long, laughter echoed through classrooms that had once stood silent. She also invited skilled healers to open a modest clinic where villagers received treatment regardless of their wealth. When harvests failed, she organized food deliveries and encouraged prosperous landowners to donate grain instead of storing excessive reserves. None of these acts were announced with grand ceremonies. Hazel preferred quiet results over public praise. The common people soon began calling her the Duchess with the Golden Heart. Their affection spread faster than court gossip, and unfortunately, so did resentment. Several who had once hoped to marry the Duke viewed Hazel's growing popularity as an insult. During formal banquets, they smiled politely before delivering carefully disguised insults. Your Grace speaks remarkably well for someone raised outside noble society. I suppose village habits are difficult to forget. I wonder how long kindness alone can sustain a duchy. Hazel answered every remark with calm courtesy, refusing to reward cruelty with anger. Her composure frustrated those who wished to see her lose control, yet each encounter left invisible wounds upon her heart. The Duke witnessed some of those conversations but remained silent. Later, when Hazel gently asked whether she had embarrassed the family, he answered without emotion. People grow tired of rumors eventually. Ignore them. She nodded obediently. He believed he had offered practical advice. She heard only loneliness. Despite the distance between them, Hazel never neglected her responsibilities inside the palace. Every evening she instructed the servants to prepare dinner for two, even though experience suggested she would dine alone. She waited beside the long table until candles burned low, hoping the Duke might appear. Most nights urgent meetings kept him away. When servants quietly removed untouched dishes, Hazel thanked them with a smile that never reached her eyes. One afternoon, she noticed the Duke's favorite riding coat hanging inside the wardrobe with a torn sleeve. Rather than assigning the task elsewhere, she carefully repaired the stitching herself. Her fingers remembered countless evenings spent mending clothes during childhood, and within an hour the damage had disappeared completely. She returned the coat without mentioning her work. The following morning, the Duke paused after putting it on. He examined the flawless repair with mild surprise before asking his valet who had restored it. The Duchess repaired it personally, Your Grace. He frowned thoughtfully but said nothing. Days later, while returning from inspecting nearby villages, the Duke found several servants gathered outside the clinic Hazel had established. Inside, she knelt beside an elderly maid who had collapsed from exhaustion, gently cooling her forehead while the physician prepared medicine. Hazel remained there until long after sunset, refusing to leave until the woman finally smiled with relief. Watching from the doorway, the Duke experienced something unfamiliar. Respect mixed quietly with admiration. He had always judged leadership through efficiency and discipline. Hazel ruled hearts through compassion. Neither method was wrong, yet hers accomplished something his authority never could. Without realizing it, he began asking household staff whether the Duchess had eaten lunch or returned safely from her visits. He quietly instructed guards to accompany her journeys from a distance, ensuring protection without restricting her independence. When malicious rumors reached government officials, he dismissed them before they spread further, never telling Hazel he had done so. These gestures felt insignificant to him, merely practical decisions expected of a responsible husband. To everyone else, they hinted at feelings he refused to recognize. One evening, after completing village inspections together, they passed a group of children playing beside a riverbank. The youngsters spotted Hazel first and rushed toward her with delighted laughter, presenting her wildflowers woven into uneven crowns. She knelt among them, laughing freely as they insisted she wear their handmade gift. Hidden beneath the shade of an old oak tree, the Duke watched her radiant smile soften the entire afternoon. Without thinking, the corners of his own mouth lifted in response. When he realized he was smiling because of her happiness, his expression vanished instantly. For the first time since their marriage, the unshakable certainty surrounding his guarded heart began to crack, though neither of them understood what those fragile cracks would eventually become. The quiet changes in the Duke's behavior remained unnoticed by Hazel because they arrived too late to mend the loneliness she carried each day. Although he occasionally shared dinner with her and asked brief questions about her charitable work, his words never reached beyond courtesy. Every conversation ended with respectful silence, leaving Hazel to wonder whether she had mistaken kindness for the beginning of affection. She reminded herself of the promise she had made on their wedding night. She would never ask for a love that had not been freely offered, no matter how deeply her heart longed for it. One afternoon, while organizing documents in the palace library, Hazel discovered a small bundle of sealed correspondence tucked inside a cabinet reserved for official records. She had entered the room searching for financial reports related to the village schools, believing the letters belonged with other administrative papers. As she gathered the documents, one envelope slipped onto the floor. The royal seal had already been broken, and the folded parchment opened slightly upon impact. She intended to place it back without reading, but a single sentence caught her eye. Lady Hazel remains the safest choice, because she possesses neither political alliances nor personal ambitions. A chill traveled through her body. Unable to silence the growing unease inside her, Hazel carefully unfolded the remaining pages. The letters revealed private discussions between the royal family and the Duke before their marriage. They praised Hazel's honorable reputation, but described her as someone unlikely to interfere with government affairs or challenge the Duke's authority. One message contained his own unmistakable handwriting. "I seek a wife who understands responsibility, not romance. Lady Hazel fulfills that requirement perfectly." Her hands trembled. Every gentle smile she had offered, every hopeful evening she had spent waiting at an empty dining table, every silent prayer that affection might blossom with time suddenly felt painfully foolish. The words spoken on their wedding night had never been temporary caution. They had been the truth from the beginning. Hazel folded the letters carefully, returned them exactly as she had found them, and walked slowly back to her chambers. She did not cry immediately. The pain settled too deeply for tears. Instead, she sat beside the window where she had once watched the sunset on her first night in the palace. Beyond the gardens, birds soared freely across the bright afternoon sky, reminding her that even the gentlest creatures eventually flew away when they no longer belonged. That evening, she made the most difficult decision of her life. She packed only a small travel bag containing simple clothing, a family photograph, and the worn notebook where she had recorded ideas for helping villages across the duchy. Every expensive necklace, elegant gown, and jeweled ornament remained untouched. None of those treasures had ever filled the emptiness within her. Before leaving, Hazel wrote one final letter. "Thank you for keeping your promise. You gave me safety, respect, and every comfort a duchess could ask for. You truly accepted responsibility for my life, but never for my heart. I leave without anger because love cannot be demanded. I only hope that one day someone earns yours as completely as you unknowingly possessed mine. Farewell." She placed the letter upon the Duke's desk beside his official documents and departed before sunrise without escort or ceremony. Late the following evening, the Duke returned after several days spent resolving disputes along the duchy's borders. The palace welcomed him with unusual silence. No soft footsteps crossed the entrance hall. No gentle voice greeted his arrival. Assuming Hazel had retired early, he continued toward his study. The letter waited where she had left it. As he read each line, confusion gave way to disbelief. He hurried toward her chambers. The wardrobe stood nearly full, yet her favorite shawl was gone. Fresh flowers, she always arranged beside the window, had begun to wilt. The embroidery frame she used during quiet evenings rested unfinished. For the first time since inheriting the duchy, the enormous palace felt painfully empty. He questioned every servant. None had stopped her because she had ordered no carriage, carried almost nothing, and smiled kindly before saying she wished to travel quietly. The head maid hesitated before speaking. "Your Grace," the Duchess never complained. She simply hoped each day might be different. Those words struck harder than any accusation. The following morning, the Duke visited the village school Hazel had founded. Children asked eagerly when their beloved Duchess would return. Elderly villagers offered prayers for her happiness, believing she had traveled to continue helping others elsewhere. Everywhere he looked, he found traces of her compassion. Everywhere he listened, he heard gratitude spoken with genuine affection. Only then did he finally understand the truth he had refused to face. He had never been protecting Hazel merely because she was his responsibility. Somewhere between quiet dinners, repaired coats, patient smiles, and selfless acts of kindness, she had become the irreplaceable center of his heart. Determined to find the woman he had driven away, the Duke abandoned every comfort, mounted his horse before dawn, and began searching beyond the borders of his duchy, unaware that the greatest test of his life had only just begun. The Duke's search stretched across neighboring towns and quiet countryside roads, where each passing day stripped away another layer of his pride. He no longer traveled with a grand procession or announced his title wherever he stopped. Instead, he asked innkeepers, merchants, teachers, and farmers whether they had seen a young woman with gentle eyes who loved helping strangers more than herself. Most people shook their heads, but every disappointing answer strengthened his determination instead of weakening it. For the first time in his life, he understood that some treasures could never be replaced once they disappeared. Nearly 2 months after Hazel left, an elderly traveler recognized the description and directed him toward a peaceful farming village hidden between green hills. The Duke arrived shortly before sunset and found a modest schoolhouse surrounded by children laughing beneath towering trees. Standing at the doorway was Hazel, wearing a simple dress instead of elegant gowns, her sleeves rolled to her elbows as she guided young students through their lessons. She looked healthier than she had inside the palace, and the gentle smile on her face reached her eyes at last. She noticed him immediately. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The children quietly slipped outside, sensing that something important stood between the two adults. Finally, Hazel broke the silence. "I never expected to see you here." The Duke lowered his head. "I came because I was too late to understand what you meant to me." She listened without interrupting, but her expression remained calm rather than hopeful. "You once told me I was only your responsibility," she said softly. I finally accepted those words. Here, no one expects me to wait for affection that will never come. He stepped closer, careful not to invade the peace she had built. I was wrong. You were honest, Hazel replied. There is a difference. Her quiet answer carried no bitterness, making it even harder to bear. The Duke asked her to return home. Hazel gently refused. I don't hate you, she explained. If I did, leaving would have been easy. I left because I finally realized I deserved to stop waiting for someone to choose me. Those words forced him to confront the selfishness hidden beneath his sense of duty. Instead of arguing, he rented a tiny cottage at the edge of the village. Each morning he volunteered wherever help was needed. He repaired broken fences, carried heavy supplies for elderly farmers, taught children how to ride horses safely, and helped rebuild roofs damaged by strong winds. The villagers knew nothing about his title. To them, he was simply a traveler determined to make himself useful. Hazel watched from a distance. She noticed blistered hands that had once held only polished pens and ceremonial swords. She saw him sharing simple meals with laborers instead of demanding luxurious banquets. More importantly, she realized he never asked anyone to praise his efforts. He worked because the work itself mattered. Weeks passed. Trust, once shattered, did not return quickly. The Duke never pressured Hazel to forgive him. Instead, he greeted her kindly each morning and accepted every conversation as a gift rather than a right. They gradually began teaching children together, laughing over innocent questions and celebrating small successes. Slowly, the silence between them transformed from painful distance into peaceful companionship. During the village harvest festival, colorful ribbons fluttered across the square while music echoed beneath the evening sky. Families danced, children chased lanterns, and neighbors shared homemade food around long wooden tables. As the celebration quieted, the Duke led Hazel to a meadow where countless wildflowers swayed gently beneath the fatting sunlight. There, without hesitation, he knelt before her. Tears shimmered in his eyes. The greatest mistake of my life was believing responsibility could replace love, he said. I thought protecting you was enough because I was afraid of needing someone. Then you left, and I realized the palace had never been my home. You were. I cannot erase the pain I caused, but if you allow me, I will spend every day proving that my heart finally belongs to you. Hazel's own tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She had imagined hearing those words countless times, yet now they carried weight because they had been earned through humility instead of spoken from obligation. She reached for his hands and whispered, "Don't love me because you almost lost me. Love me because you've learned who you want to become." He smiled through his tears. "I choose you today, tomorrow, and every day after." Hazel gently helped him rise, before embracing him beneath the open sky. Together they returned to the duchy, not as strangers bound by duty, but as partners united by genuine love. Before the royal court and the gathered nobles, the Duke publicly apologized for failing the woman who had stood beside him with unwavering grace. Then he declared that the greatest treasure of his lands was neither wealth nor power but his duchess. Inspired by Hazel's compassion, they expanded schools, clinics, and charitable programs throughout the duchy, transforming countless lives together. Years later, their home echoed with children's laughter, blooming gardens, and peaceful evenings shared without silence between them. The painful words spoken on their wedding night faded into memory because they no longer defined their marriage. Hazel had never been only his responsibility. She became the love that transformed his guarded heart, while he became the man worthy of the unwavering devotion she had always carried within her. And together, they proved that love chosen freely could heal even the deepest wounds forever.